We have Keyanna Bowen here from Easton Lane, her brand. And I'm gonna have her introduce herself because I think everyone's probably seen her bio a million times that I've been sharing on Instagram. So I want to hear it from you now.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm totally excited to be here. It's so hard for me to like introduce myself because I never really know what to say, because if you read my bio, then you know that I kind of do a lot of things, but I kind of sum it all up as an interior photographer and interior design blogger slash content creator. I live in Salisbury, Maryland, which is on the Eastern Shore of Maryland in a small little town. And I'm self-taught. I started working in photography by accident a little bit. My first job was focus was my blog, Easton Lane. And I wanted to start taking pictures of homes because I love interior design. So I taught myself how to use a camera. I started posting the work on my blog. And from there, a few designers and builders and real estate agents started to see my work and asked if I would shoot for them. And so it was kind of a hobby that transitioned into a full-time career, which was unexpected. But again, I'm just self-taught, constantly learning and trying to grow. So that's kind of my sum up.
Yeah, and that was kind of recently, because when I first started following you, I followed you, I think almost specifically because of your blog, and you were doing a rental, renovation to your own rental space. That not that you owned as a rental, but like you rented yourself. And I thought that was really interesting. And I've just seen you like transform into this interior photographer that's like everywhere. It's amazing. How did that happen? Like you said kind of, but like talk us through that a little bit more.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it's always interesting when like people ask me to like do talks and stuff like this. I'm like, do they know I've only been doing this for like 3 years? So I'm in no way an expert. I still very much consider myself a novice at this, but so I started doing a lot of real estate photography. So again, I was starting my blog, taking pictures of my own projects or friends' projects. Mostly realtors started to contact me. So I did a lot of real estate photography. This was probably, back in 2015. No, probably like 2016, 2017. So for a couple of years, I did real estate photography, and I knew I always wanted to transition into interiors because I just loved interior photography and interior design. Living in a small town, that was very hard to do because there are very few, if any, interior designers in my area. And I think at the time I was maybe one of 2 people who even did real estate photography. It really wasn't a thing. And there were like wedding photographers or portrait photographers who also did real estate, but I kind of solely specialized in real estate. So that was kind of hard for me to figure out, okay, how do I learn about interior photography and transition into it? Because there is a big difference between how you shoot for real estate and how you shoot for architecture and interiors. So I started to go online and do some searching. I'm about 2 hours away from DC and Philadelphia. And so since there were no local photographers who specialize in interiors who had, like years of experience, I started to search for some photographers in the DC area to see if I could assist them to kind of learn how interior shoots are done. That was actually a little bit harder than I thought, which, we can maybe talk about that later about, the importance of assisting and, being open to having people assist you, because I really feel like that's the best way to learn. So yeah, it was tricky to find someone who would be willing to let me assist them. I was literally like, I will work pro bono. Like, I just need to see how it's done and what you do. And, of course, a lot of them were kind of like, well, I either already have an assistant who I use a lot, or, so it's tricky. Thankfully, I did find one photographer, Stacy Zarin Goldberg. She's an amazing DC photographer. I started assisting her, and that was how I was really able to learn about shooting for interiors, lighting, things like that. And from there, that kind of helped me to get my feet wet. There was like a point where she got really overbooked with work. And so sometimes she would refer me. So I was able to kind of get a few clients that way. And then most of my work actually started from an interior designer who was in Rehoboth that we met on Instagram. So just a lot of networking, trying to discover designers, sometimes offering my services for free to try to like gain the work and experience with assisting. And that's kind of how it led to today. And I'll be honest, like, within the last 2 years, obviously, my business really exploded, back in 2020 with the whole George Floyd murders, and a lot of people were looking to diversify and find new talent and stuff like that. And that's when a lot of designers and magazines and stuff started to find my work. And so since within the last 2 years, that's probably why you've seen a lot of my face. But yeah, I still very much consider myself a beginner, but I do believe that, there are lessons to be learned at every stage. So hopefully there's some good takeaways from this interview.
Yeah. And, you took a bold choice. Like you mentioned the small town, life. And I'm from also Eastern Shore of Maryland. And I think you mentioned when we were talking before, like, I just do everything. Like, that's how I approached it. But you like really was like, I want to do this specific thing in photography, and go with it. Like, why did you choose interiors? Like, what do you like about interior photography?
Yeah, so like I said, I've always loved interior design. And so the mission for my blog, Easton Lane, was to kind of showcase homes, do renovations, as you were saying, of my own projects and document that on my blog. And so I just always loved elements of home and interiors. So when it was kind of like a natural progression for me to start shooting interiors because, I was doing the photography of my own spaces, and that's kind of how people started to find me. And it's really cool kind of being able to merge those two elements, because I'm a little bit different in the sense that when I'm working with another interior designer, having that background and I really creates a very cool collaboration experience for us on set. So I just love having that element to be able to offer that like additional asset and like creative collaboration with my clients. So it was just a natural fit. Like everything about Easton Lane and what I do, it might seem like I do a lot of things. It's like, oh, well, you do interior photography and you do interior design and you do interior content creation. But the main thing is interiors, because that's always been my passion, all things home.
Right. Yeah. And this isn't necessarily photography related, but you had that, I forget, I don't have it written down, but that web series that you had come out was for Lowe's, right?
Yeah. So I actually went to school for broadcast journalism. And my dream was to, do something on like HGTV or something like that. And so part of my blog was also to start, documenting that and kind of doing some YouTube videos and things like that. So I did do a YouTube video of my rental renovation where I was renovating my own rental. And I did like a few little web series for that. And a production company who was doing some content for Lowe's saw it and asked me if I would do a series for them. So yeah, I mean, I love all elements of design media, whether it's television, whether it's photography. I feel like, there's definitely two facets in that. There's like interior design services, and then there's like interior design media. And I really love the idea of being able to be like a resource and inspiration to all and give access to that to everyone. And so that's why I kind of try to niche my brand into being more of the design media element. Yeah. Although I do offer design services, but I only take on a small amount of clientele a year for design.
Right. And that, I followed her because of you a while ago, Emily Henderson, correct? Yeah. And what's your role with her? Are you doing photography with her, or is that an interior design thing? Or?
Yeah, so Emily Henderson, who, if you guys aren't familiar with her, she is a New York Times bestselling author. She's a huge interior designer. She actually used to have a show on HGTV a few years ago. So she's, and now she has a huge blog. I think it almost has like 2 million, unique views a month and almost 1 million followers on Instagram. So she's just a huge force in the interior design space. And she started a mentorship program for blogging. And because that is, a passion of mine, I applied and I was able to get accepted into the mentorship program. Part of that was to redesign a space in my home and document it on her blog. And it's interesting because, you know, a lot of times, you know, even with her, she has a team of people who, you know, she might do the design, but someone else comes in and does the photography, and, you know, someone else writes it. And so like, I'm kind of a one-man band. So, you know, I'm like doing the renovation and then like taking the photos and editing the photos and writing the content. So it's a lot, but, you know, it's one of those things that I feel like my blog will definitely give me the opportunity to experience all facets of my passions. So we did that, and currently we still work together quite heavily. She has a few East Coast design contributors who I shoot for her blog, and then I also still do design contribution as well for her site.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah, she's one of those people. Again, I've been following so long. I feel like I'm following her, and I'm like, this is fascinating.
You're bringing up stuff that I forgot. I was like, oh yeah, Lowe's. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
You've done a lot. You've done a lot. Speaking of that, with like blogs, what I've seen, you know, on Instagram, you shoot a lot for blogs. Is that still where you're shooting, or are you shooting for magazines, or where's your stuff live?
Yeah, so initially it was mostly the blog space, but within the last 2 years, since I've been working with so many interior designers, I've been getting their work published. So, you know, I've been published in most of the national publications. Architectural Digest recently and I feel so weird. I have issues like telling things about myself, but Architectural Digest just named me as one of their top 50 interior photographers, which was just, you know, I'm still so humbled by that. So yeah, I've been, you know, very lucky to be able to have my work published now internationally and nationally, and all the amazing publications. So I'm so grateful for that.
I just need to react to that. That's
Thank
so
you.
amazing.
It's so cool.
Okay, I'm still working.
That's the exact reaction I had when I got that email. I was like, what in the world? So cool. And you know, it's really interesting because so when I was trying to get into the interior space, I would flip through these magazines and I would look at the photographers who were listed as the photographers, and you know, you notice kind of the same names, you know, who are being published and who are being called to do these shoots. And so I remember asking a photographer, saying like, well, how would I get published? And she kind of made the fact like, well, they pretty much just have a Rolodex of people who like they work with, who they consistently start to use. And I was like, well, darn, like I'll never get a chance. And, you know, even especially being a female in the interior photography industry is already like a minority. And then being a Black female is like, lowers my chances even more. And so, you know, I'm really, as terrible as the things that happened in 2020 were, I do feel grateful that it kind of opened up the eyes of so many people to start searching out other talent that are out there, specifically minorities. And so now being able to flip through and, you know, seeing more diversity in these magazines from not only just the photographer aspect, but also the designers who are publishing, is really just the direction, you know, that I feel like we need to take in this industry.
Yeah, so true. That's so cool. What else would I want to ask you? Let's go through some of your work before we get to, you know, bogged down with these questions, and kind of talk us through your process, because I've seen some really fun photos of you like in corners, and I want to know like how those are done.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Hopefully.
We'll let you still.
Okay, can you see my screen? Yeah. All right. So I'll just take you through some of my stuff. So this is my blog, Easton Lane, and again, you know, I pretty much document my personal home projects that I'm doing on my blog. You know, this was the office renovation that I did with Emily. So, you know, I'm taking the before photos, I'm showing my design plan for the room, I'm painting and doing the work, and then I'm revealing the space. So it's, like I said, it's really like five people in one, you know, but
so much
it's a fun way to, like, again, being able to explore all my passions, whether it's design or photography. But all this work on my photography page are photos that I've done for other interior designers. And you can kind of see my aesthetic is definitely a little bit more like light and airy. I mostly use natural light, but I do use strobes as well, just to give me that look that I'm going for. And I think the best way probably to go through my process is actually just to show you guys some behind the scenes, because I share a lot of that on my Instagram. Are you able to see?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me go back a little bit. I share a lot of behind the scenes on my Instagram. And again, it goes back to the whole fact of like, I feel like, and I don't know if it's like this in other photography categories, but in interior photography, it's very much like a secret society almost. It's very hard to find people who are open to assisting, or also like sharing their process, their rates, things like that. So I've always been one to say like, I'm an open book. Like, you can ask me anything. I'm very transparent and willing to share, my process, my rates, my information, anything to help others who are just getting started or have been in the industry for a long time, figure out how to do this thing, because I had no idea what I was doing starting out. So yeah, as you can see, I'm pretty much always squeezed into a tiny space. And I feel like that's kind of my specialty, being able to get tight shots. This is a bathroom that I shot. So for my process, you can see that I have the camera just on the toilet, and I also have a light, one of my strobes with an umbrella to kind of bounce some more light in there. And that is kind of what we ended with. So if you kind of, again, squeezed in a corner, always trying to get the shot. This one is pretty interesting because this is a project that I actually helped with the interior design. I also did the styling, and now I'm also shooting it. So again, kind of those like triple threat type situations, squeezed in a corner, like always. So I feel like this is a good example here of styling, which is something I also offer to my interior design clients. If they hire me for photography, they can add on a styling option as well. And so this is kind of just showing like the before, which is a very, nice bedroom. But of course, with interior photography, you really want to add in those layers and those details. So the after I styled it, you can just see kind of how more interesting and visually appealing the space is for the camera. This is an example of fake it till you make it, which happens a lot in interior photography, where like sometimes the full room isn't completed. And so for this particular shoot, I was actually shooting for a bedding company. And this is my bedroom, which is not designed at all, but I needed to kind of create a little vignette, which is what I did with some fakeness. And you would never know that the rest of the bedroom looks like a hot mess. So yeah, if you just like kind of go through my behind the scenes on my Instagram, you'll be able to see a lot of my process. One of which is like with interior shoots, you always create a huge mess behind you, but it's not what you see, it's what the camera sees. So that's the mess that was created. And then this was like the shot. You'll never know what's happening behind the scenes sometimes. So I think that's the best way to kind of get a little bit of my process. Obviously, interior photography is a lot about how the space reads, because how you see the space in real life is not how the camera will read it. So this is an example of my living room. And if you take a look at it, you'll notice that like nothing is where it would actually be. Like the table is not centered to the sofa. As I go through a little bit more, you'll see how the table is like super far away from the sofa as well, which wouldn't be the natural position. That this chair is usually in the corner. And so the positioning looks totally off in real life, but on camera, everything looks centered and well positioned. And I think that's one of the biggest things I learned between the difference of real estate photography versus interior photography is how much moving of furniture and making sure prop placement is exactly where it needs to be. It's just a very long kind of tedious process and very labor intensive. But at the end, you'll get that kind of perfect magazine ready look, even though in real life, nothing is really placed where it should be. So that's a little bit about that. And again, if you check my Instagram out, it's tons of slides of just showing my process and things like that.
That's fascinating. I never thought about that. Like I've done a bit of interior stuff myself, but nothing, it's mostly kind of like real estate stuff. And that's just fascinating, moving things around. And yeah, and you show a lot of that in your Instagram. So yeah, definitely check that out, everyone. It's very cool. Let's see, what else? What's a typical day like for you? Because I know you typically go to DC a lot for work, but are you other places or?
Yeah, so because I live in a small town, like I said, there's not much work here. So the majority of my clients are in the DC, Maryland area or Philadelphia, which is where I do most of my work. So I mostly just, like a typical day is, like, for example, next week is considered a travel week. So I try to have a travel week and an at-home week. Sometimes it gets a little mixed up, but so when I'm home, like today, it's pretty much editing, because the week before I was pretty much gone that whole week in DC or Philly shooting. So a typical day, when it's a shoot day, I will, wake up. I'm a very early person, wake up around 4:35. I've just always been a morning person. I typically will do anything I need to do as far as like getting the house together and stuff before I leave for the week. And then I will check into my hotel and leave. And then the next day will be my shoots. So for my shoot times usually start around 8 or 9 a.m. And they're usually 8 to 10 hours long if it's a full day. And so, yeah, I don't know. I can get like down into the specifics, but typical, it's usually a travel week or a home week. I actually do have a shoot tomorrow in DC, so I will be doing that, but starts early, travel to DC, stay there for pretty much the whole week, and then come back home. And the next week is full of editing.
That's awesome. That's very inspiring as someone from the shore, like that you're just like really in both worlds,
Yeah, I mean, for me, and you'll know this, like when I went in high school, it's like everyone's biggest dream when you live in a small town is to move to a big city, And for a long time, I thought that I would do that too. I was like, okay, I'm going to go to college. I went to college at Howard University in Washington, DC, which, DC is pretty much like a second home to me now. And then after college, I was like, I'm going to move to LA and I'm going to, be on TV or whatever. And then I end up coming home after college and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this slower, simpler lifestyle. And there was something that just drew me back home to the shore. And so I was really kind of in this like caveat of like, is it possible for me to like make a creative career for myself in such a small town? And, I had the decision to make, am I going to move away to a big city and where, all the opportunities are, or am I going to stay in this small town? And I chose the latter. And it is a lot of traveling back and forth. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm crazy. It would be a lot easier. But again, living on the shore, there's just something about this lifestyle that you just can't give up.
No, so true. Yeah, I was the same way. So I totally agree with all of that. And anything that you would, I don't know if we have any, aspiring interior photographers here, and maybe they live somewhere or they're just graduating from college. Like, what would you say to them? What advice would you give?
So, and I say this advice knowing that it's not as easy as it sounds, but if you can assist established photographer, I think that is one of the, best ways to really learn. So that would kind of be my first recommendation, to assist someone. And if that's not an option, or you're kind of struggling with that, then kind of do what I did. Unfortunately, I didn't go to school for photography. I wish I did, but I just picked up a camera, watched YouTube videos and, taught myself and started practicing on small little rooms in my own home. And eventually, started doing shooting rooms for my friends, just anything that I could do to practice. And then secondly, if you can't assist someone, like try to find a photographer who is willing to, talk and answer questions. More than happy, like, please reach out to me anytime. I'm more than happy to like help or answer any questions that you may have about getting started, or assisting too.
Great. And what's coming up? What are your next steps? Anything that you're working on currently that you can talk about?
Some stuff I can't talk about yet, but I do have some really great interior design projects that I'm shooting next year that are going to be published. So I'm excited to see those in print. And really just more like, I want to focus on my blog a little bit more, you know, again, whether it's providing more resources and information about my photography, like photography and how my process for that, whether it's sharing more inspiration about interior design. I just really feel like the only way to really be able to learn anything is if someone else shares it with you, you know? So I'm just trying to give back as much as I can to people and pay it forward.
Yeah. And you learn so much by, you know, curating that stuff yourself as well. I've been doing that recently, and you're like, oh wait, I didn't realize I knew all this stuff. It's like, it's nice to share it with other people. Yeah, that's awesome. I think we have some questions here, just real quick. And if I have to think of any, someone asked if you prefer email or Instagram message to reach out to you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, probably just DM me first, and then we can kind of set up a time. My emails get a little crazy and buried, but so my DMs are a little bit more easily accessible for me. So yeah, feel free to slide into my DMs, and if it's something I can just answer quickly through chat, that's fine. But I'm also more than happy to hop on a call if you want to.
Nice. And people are arguing that they want to assist you, I think.
Yeah, so again, that's one of those things. It's very, I've been trying to figure out, okay, like how do I do this? Because there is an element, especially now with like COVID and everything, where it's like not hard, but bringing more people on set is a little tricky. But it's like, I wish I can just like do a shoot and say, hey, if you want to kind of be a fly on the wall, you know, come hang out and we can, you know, hang out and shoot this house together. But I do have, you know, some shoots coming up next year that I will be looking for assistance for. And a lot of photographers get into the state of like finding that one assistant and consistently using them, which is great. And I have been doing that too. There is one girl that I've been, you know, using on the regular, but that has been my whole caveat of not being able to assist people because they're like, oh, I already have an assistant. So I think I'm going to like offer it on more of like a rotating basis. And that way I will be able to share, you know, my knowledge with as many people as possible.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. I started as assistant for a long time. I still do it to this day, and it's a great experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Someone asked, what does your go-to equipment for an interior shoot look like?
So I am a Canon girl. I use Canon Mark IV. I'm looking at my equipment. 24-70 is like my go-to lens, the workhorse, but I also love the 35. I also love the 50. And of course the 24 tilt shift is great for interiors. My tripod is a Manfrotto with the 410 Manfrotto gear head on it. And then for lights, I use Pro Photo Strobes. I think they're like the D ones.
Okay. Any other questions? Those are great questions so far. You're also, feel free to bring them in the chat or ask them personally if you're decent, as Chris said. How does one find assistance?
How does one find assistance? So what I did, top 5 inspirational interior photographers. Okay, cool. So to find assistance, there was Wonderful Machine, is a agency a photo agency, and on there they have like a list of photographers and you can search by state. So I just kind of searched Maryland or whatever, and kind of, I don't know if their emails were on there or not, but basically stalk their Instagram or whatever to try to find their email and try to reach out through DMs or through email. And now, honestly, I just, how does one find assistance? Sorry, I think I think I'm answering the wrong one.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
So if you're asking how do you find an assistant, then I don't know, honestly.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if you could answer that.
I do know that APADC though does have a link on their site that, you know, has find an assistant. So you could probably go do it that way. But personally, actually a really good question, because I've always just been asking to be an assistant. So it's never really occurred to me that maybe they're not getting like a ton of increase to assist.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, we haven't updated ours too much on the APA site, and we need to do that. So if you are an assistant in here today, let us know, and we would like to post those things more on our website. Let's go to Rob's question. Top 5 inspirational interior photographers. It's a great question.
Oh man. Lisa Patrol, who is out of Texas. She does all of Magnolia, Joanna Gaines, Fixer Upper Show. I mean, tons of stuff. Her work is beautiful. Harris Kinjar, of course. The way he's able to like capture that moody vibe. I love that. Jennifer Hughes, who is actually a photographer in Baltimore. Like, she's one of my people who I'm like, please, can I assist you one day? Her work is awesome. Who else? What is that, 3? I think that would be like my top 3, but there's tons, I'm sure.
Sure. Someone said, any tips for using strobes for the first time? I'm guessing in terms of interior photography, they're using natural light, but would like to start incorporating strobe when needed.
Yeah, so, well, yeah, of course, Stacy, of course. She's pretty much like my sister now and like best friend. I love her. So for strobes, lighting is one of those things where, again, it's really just trial and error. Like even on set, it's like changing the location and changing the dials. So my best advice would be, just if you don't have one yet, just rent one. Again, I love the pro photo models, but there's others out there too. And practice first before you're on set, because it just sucks up so much time, even once you know like how to use them. And really it's about finding where the light should naturally be. So a lot of times when you look at a photo, you're kind of looking at it like, this looks lit, like it looks like it's a flash or a strobe. And the point of using a strobe is to still make it look like natural light. So typically what I do is look at where the light is naturally coming from. So if there's a window source that the light is already streaming into, how can I try to mimic that? So when I blend everything in Photoshop, I get that extra light that I need, but it still looks like it's coming from that source.
Yeah, that's great. Any trends in interior photography that you're into or not into?
I feel like, so another, I think being so wrapped into the interior design world, I feel like interior designers kind of, push us to a certain trend. And I'm starting to actually see more of a moody, underexposed type photography for interiors, versus before everything was like super light and bright and almost like overexposed to a point. Like, so I think we're going to start to trend into more of like a very more kind of moody vibe. If you look at someone like Amber Lewis of Amber Interiors, who is a big time interior designer, Heidi Callier, who is a big time interior designer, like other interior designers are looking at their work and saying, I want my photos to look like them. And so then as an interior photographer, I'm like, okay, now I have to try to emulate that type of vibe. So that's something I've been doing more of, is shooting a little bit more moody with my photography.
Nice. Yeah, and that changes your lighting situation completely,
Exactly. Yeah.
Laura Chase asked, how many photos/layers do you think you use to composite?
Oh gosh, I mean, it really depends. No less than like 3 or 4. I'm almost always doing at least 3 or 4. I've done as many as like 14, different layers. So it really just depends on the look that you're going for. But I mean, you almost always need your standard base layer, your window exposure layer. And then for me, since I'm really trying to capture light in a certain way, when I am using my strobes, those are also going to be kind of separate layers that I'm painting in to get that finished look that I want. So yeah, it could be, anywhere as low as 3 to as many as 14. And probably there's photographers who have done even more than that. So, it usually takes me at least an hour and most times more to edit a photo.
Nice. And you're all self-taught with that too, with editing?
I am. And that's one of the things, hey, if there's any photographers in there who would let me see them work Photoshop, let me know. That's probably been the hardest, transition of trying to learn Photoshop. But once you know the basics of layering, it's fine. But I would love to get some more skills in that area as well.
That's awesome. Someone asked, do you use a Cam Ranger or something similar when you tether?
So I use Capture One, and I tether to my laptop through Capture One.
Nice.
I'm a Photoshop guy, Zach. Oh my gosh. I don't know if I started following you already, but I'm going to be sliding into your DMs.
Zach has some great stuff too. Yeah, follow him. Judy says, do you have help with processing? Do you have an employee or an administrative assistant or a retoucher?
I do not. And, that's a very interesting situation in the interior photography world. It's been something I really need to look into, and I know people do use them, but because with interior photography, I feel like there's definitely multiple layers, like so many photos that you're layering, and definitely a look, like every photographer, you could kind of see like, oh, that's kind of their look. Mm-hmm. Having someone else edit your photos, it's kind of hard for them to mimic that. And then also like just the prep stage of like having to notate, okay, I want this window exposure, but I want you to paint, so it's a lot of things to try to delegate to someone. So I personally do all my retouching, but that is something that I am looking into in the future. So I'm able to offload some of the backlog that I have right now.
Yeah. It's hard to sometimes take that next step. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome.
100% agree, but I'm 3 weeks behind in process. Oh, I know. It is very, very overwhelming.
It is. Any other questions, people? Maybe not. Anything else you'd like to say, Keyanna? Like what's going on?
So can you talk about Instagram captioning for interiors?
Here we go. Here coming some more.
Yeah. Instagram captioning for interiors. Can you elaborate a little bit more what you mean by that? Typically, how many images do you deliver per hour? Okay, so this is a good one because this is one of the big things I learned where there's really an education process that has to happen. So the question is typically how many images do you deliver per hour of shooting? Mm-hmm. So for interior photography, it's really about quality over quantity. And that's the discussion you really need to have with your clients beforehand and let them know, like, this isn't like a real estate shoot where we're trying to get every single angle. And it's really about capturing the best angle or angles of the space and telling the story of the space, especially if we're talking about, publishing and things like that. So typically, we might only do 3 shots of a room, and those 3 shots might take 2 or 3 hours to shoot. And so a lot of times think like, oh, it's a full day, 10 hours, you're probably getting like 100 photos. And I'm like, no, you're probably getting like 20 photos, So it's definitely not a numbers game when it comes to interior photography. It's really just about the quality of each shot, especially when you're dealing with all the equipment and getting the lighting right and things of that nature.
Someone said lights on or off.
Lights are always off for me. However, if there is a client who wants the lights on, what I do is I'll take 1 shot with the lights on that I can give to them. But if you look through pretty much any of the shelter magazines, you'll never see lights on. So it's just for more of a cleaner image. I think it takes kind of a lot of the distraction away, allows you to focus on the space. And it's kind of industry standard for publications not to shoot with the lights on. However, if there's like a beautiful light fixture that my client says, oh, I would love to get a shot with it on, then I will provide that image for them. But if I pitch it, I will not send the shot. I'll send the shot with the lights off.
Gotcha. Someone, Zach asked, how long does it take you to edit a full project normally?
Days. I mean, let's say I get 20 shots from a shoot. And let's just say it takes an hour, to edit each photo, then we're probably looking at, 2 or 3 days. However, it's really easy to get eye fatigue when you're staring at a photo for that long on the screen. And so what I like to do is a lot of times I'll, edit a few and then come back a couple of days later and look at them to make sure I like what I did. So my turnaround time, what I tell my clients is I say 2 to 4 weeks right now. I'm so backlogged. So it's 4 weeks, definitely, and sometimes a little longer. I'm sorry. But yeah, I mean, I would love to get to a place where I can turn around a project in 2 weeks. But my issue is being a travel photographer. When I have an on week and an off week, I'm not coming back home, after a shoot where I can start the editing process. So it kind of hinders that ability there to like get a jump start on the editing. But But yeah, I typically give a 2 to 4 week turnaround for photos. And that gives me time to kind of breathe from them, go back, look at them, and really make sure I like what I did.
Great. And Sarah Brown, I think you should do this. Have you thought about hosting a workshop or mentorship?
It's tough because I feel like I'm still so green, like I feel like I'm still a newbie, which is why I'm an open book, like on private discussions and stuff, but I'm not sure if I'm at the level or credentials where I would feel like, sharing from a workshop perspective. But of course, if anybody ever wanted to or was interested in like a mentorship, I'm more than happy, but just know I'm still constantly learning daily, about photography. So we're kind of growing together in this.
I think it's natural after your web series. I feel like you need to do something like that. Even if you're not ready right now, definitely soon. Oh man, I think it's a good last question. Thank you so much, Keyanna, for joining us today. I loved everything that you talked about. And it's funny because we were saying earlier, I followed you for so long. This is the first time we're actually like meeting. And it feels, you're equally as wonderful on your social media presence. So follow her. Like she said, she's an open book. Ask her any questions. And reach out to APADC if you have any questions as well. Hopefully join us for our next 30 minutes again next month, January 11th. And next week we have an event with Dana Niebert, so on the 16th. So again, thank you all for joining us during your lunch break. Have a great rest of your lunch break and have a great rest of your day.
Right. Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Bye.